I'm Dave Booker. Appreciate you coming by. Today we're going to continue on with Gods and More Gods. Today's chapter is Don's Dominion, where Don feels that he's been ordained by Fred's God to be the lead god, when all it is Fred's sister Karen trying to mess things up. So let's see how Don, who considers him the best of the best, to see how he gets on. Don created an office complex in his area. In the penthouse, he went over the criteria for success and the time schedule. Breaking it down into a series of spreadsheets, he created a progressive worksheet for each item that would be needed to be ready to populate the other Earth. He turned on in his desk chair and to look out over his dominion. Finally, he was in charge. He knew that he had never really been in charge of anything before. Not in his past lives, not in the facility, not at any time. He had been a grifter since he had learned that you are how you act. He acted as if he was in charge, and people assumed he was. It had worked for a while, and sometimes for a long while. Eventually, he'd be found out and tossed. Then he'd start fresh somewhere else. Here was a chance to show off what he really could do when given a proper chance. The fact that some high and powerful being had entered his dreams and told him that he was the most important of all the new gods gave him strength. That they told him that the whole weight of the success of their mission and future rested on his shoulders gave him the courage and resolve. He was planning his area with care. He would lead by example. His section of Earth would be the jewel in the crown. Granted, they were under strict restrictions on tools they could provide in the beginning, the knowledge they could give, and the assistance they could offer. No, that didn't mean there might not be a loophole somewhere if he could figure out what they were and would exploit them. For him, it was a win-at-any-cost proposition. He decided to prep his area with caves in the mountainous area. They could start in these and branch out. Caves were commodious, and most of the target areas, larger areas, had pools of water that seeped down into the caves beneath. Within the rock face were bands of coal and iron ore. He salted them out with other minerals, but he wanted them to discover the coal and iron first. Walking around, he saw that Fred had done a good job prepping the area with plenty of bison. Well, these are due to feed and clothe a growing population and encourage teamwork. Hell, one person could never be able to tackle a bison. He saw fruit trees of pears, plums, apples, and cherries. Vines of grapes grew nearby. For the most part, his people would be able to feed themselves. He found a few sticks, stones, and vines that he lashed together as examples of axes, spears, and slings. When found, they could copy the examples and make more. These he hid in the soft soil and would be the first innovations that people would come up with. Further salting of items had been suggested by the god, who seemed to be watching over him. It had been explained that creating and hiding items was not exactly cheating, as he would be following the rules at starting his people out with bare minimum. The fact that they discovered how to make these items just meant that he had chosen his devotees wisely, and they were superior to those of the other gods. Wandering close and farther away, he salted other advances around and then decided to go and get his people. Back at the facility, he called on Fred and assured him that he was doing everything in his power to ensure the success of his mission. He had his first group ready to go, and he was positive he had chosen those whose ability to advance quickly was, well, pretty much guaranteed. He said his farewells and led his people out dressed as a cross between a god and P.T. Barnum. He showed his people around and then suggested they take time to look around. Inspiration was all around them if they only dug it out. He showed them the bison and fruit and all the wonderful things he had provided to get them started. He enthused to them, not being satisfied with what they had, but to always be on the lookout for something they could do the job better. Seeing them begin to take the hint, they wandered around and searched to find what he had been talking about. Didn't quite know what they were looking for, but they were sure they'd know it when they found it. Since Don was the only one of the new guys who had checked in with him, he decided to replay the compliment repay the compliment and visit Don's area. Going incognito, he dropped in by the cave where Don had started his people. To his surprise, they were poking at the ground with sticks, walking around, peering intently at the ground, and acting as if they were looking for a contact lens. As nobody was going to pay him any attention, he entered a cave to see what was inside. Try in here. Reflected in the light from the entrance were pictures etched into the wall on how to create fire, how to braid vines to make them stronger, how to surround a bison to hunt, and then how to skin it and cut it up. It was a set on how to start fire by knocking stones together. In another cave were drawings on how to gather seeds from plants and grow more of the same thing. Other caves had instructions on building a simple hut. Wandering again outside, he was surprised to see a man standing with an axe, looking at it and scratching his head. Another farther off had a spear he was throwing up in the air and watching as it landed point down and deep in the dirt. The fact that he had nearly ended his own life in the process never occurred to him. In the distance, semi-hidden by a forested area, he could see the office complex Don had made for himself. It was hidden behind an impenetrable barrier, and only someone with God's sight could have seen it. He could see Don in the penthouse grinning and rubbing his hands. Fred was at a loss. It was true Don had followed the letter of the rules, but this salting of items and leaving instructions for them was not part of the plan. Don had found his loophole and had exploited it well. Fred went to check in with his boss to see if these were disqualifying additions. The Stone Age tools are all right, but when he looked beneath the surface of dirt, he found scatterings of technology that should take centuries to discover. Don had gone too far and had even created modern objects for them to discover. Dionysus also had been checking Don's preparations. While some were not expressly forbidden, he too felt as if this was cheating. He sat on the ground and considered if he should suggest the same idea with the other gods. He had seen Fred making an inspection and then pop off hurriedly. Understanding that Fred had been uneasy, it was simplicity itself to assume that he had checked in with a higher authority. If anything needed to be done, he would take care of it. Dionysus stayed and mingled with the people and saw them making use of the tools they had found. He saw them take a break when the sun was highest to rest in the coolness of the caves. Emerging, they made fires, hunted bison, skinned and cooked the meat. Some created a hut and smoked whatever they didn't consume. The skin was dried, scraped, and fashioned into clothes. Hell, within 5 days, everyone was dressed. Meat was available whether they hunted that day or not. A large group was beginning to simple farming, and others were gathering flax to make better clothes. Dionysus was not surprised when a simple weaver's loom was easily created to fashion linen from the flax. One of the scavengers collected a bag of wheat seeds and was busy grinding them using a large stone and a smaller one. After a while, many more gathered with her and with a great deal of effort had enough to make some flat loaves of bread, made simply with flour and water. These were gathered and consumed in the evening. Within a month, people had advanced to wearing linen clothing, allowing the bread dough to sit long enough to ferment and rise, and starting to discover metallurgy. Fred returned and set everything back to the day Don's village had started. All the items that had been salted were gone, and the drawings in the cave were non-existent. From his lofty perch, Don saw the change and burst into view. He was furious and tried to change everything back. Fred walked out of a cave, dusting his hands, and from the look on his face, Don knew he was in deep trouble. Don, this was your only mulligan. The powers above us said you went too far and that I was to start you back to square one. Your powers are off for a year. You'll have to teach them instead of just providing instructions for advanced methodology. You will also be dependent on their prayers for your sustenance. You are therefore beholden to them, as much as they are to you. Don didn't hear the last part. He only heard that his powers were being stripped for a year. Now his powers he had to teach, demonstrate, and do everything the hard way. He had to live with them and as them for a year. Angry at the way things turned out, he took on the task of training as a martinet. He was ruthless in his training and furious if his people didn't measure up. His people were in for a testing year. At the end of the year, his people had advanced past the hunter-gatherer stage. They could handle simple stone tools, chop wood, make fire, build shelters, and farm. They're on their way correctly, but it had been a tough start. Don himself was near collapse. In order to motivate them, he had to work twice as hard, twice as long, and his determination had to be twice as great. Don had expected them to be much farther along and was upset he couldn't have brought them further. His powers restored, he felt a vacation in order and headed to the mountain home Fred had provided for them. To his surprise, the other gods showed soon after. Great minds, all thinking alike, they too had felt the need for rest and recreation. So that's it for this chapter. Next one will be Rest and Recreation, where we see how they do on R&R. So I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you stopping in. Hope you enjoy these. Let me know. Some comments would be nice. I'm going to cut it off there. So have a good day. Be good to yourself. And we'll see you in another couple of days. Bye-bye.